No, no, it's just yes.
Okay, we're back to me. So the goal of this was really to show a little bit of understanding of what Meteor.js is, and basically what Meteor.js does for you is provide you a cache for your database so that you can do everything both on the client and on the server. In other words, you can have, let's say, the equivalent of your model running both on the server and the client and doing validation both on the server and client, and you don't have to rewrite that code twice. And I'm just looking at your screen and being distracted. The way it does that is it makes a local copy of your database onto your client, and basically it doesn't copy the entire database. It just copies what you're allowed to see or what you're interested in seeing. And the way it does that is by subscription, and that's what the video was explaining, is you can subscribe to a channel that you're interested in, and you can make that subscription very specific. So I'm going to go through an example and hopefully explain this a little bit better. Okay, so I just type Meteor create test app. That will create you a test, sort of like the Rails new. And then you can go inside the project and type Meteor, and that's the equivalent of Rails start. And then you have access to your app. Going to localhost 3000, just like that. Hello world. And then if I click on the button, it just says you press the button. So that's the basic app that you get. Now I'm gonna just open the code so we can have a look at. Can you guys see, or is that too small? I don't know how much I can zoom in. But basically, there's only 3 files. There's the JavaScript file. Let me try a bit bigger. JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And basically, the way the Meteor app works, you can put these files anywhere you want. It'll just compile any amount of them. It'll just compile everything together. So it'll take all your JS, put them together, all your HTML, put it together, and all your CSS files, put them together. There's no crazy. You can sort them in order within the same directory, except, so there's a couple alphabetically. You can, so by default, it will load the main file last. So if you have a main.html or a main.javascript, it will load that last. And if you have folders, it will start with the deepest nested folder back out to the top level. Also, if you have a lib folder, it will do that folder first, and then all the other folders. So that's maybe a lot of info to take in, but bear with me. So in the JavaScript file, this is the app we're looking at. Very simple. If it's a client, so if you're on the client, then run this code, and if you're on the server, run this code. On the client, we're saying, look at the template hello, and the templates are named. They're just pieces of HTML that you have in any HTML file, and they have the syntax template and the name. So in this case, hello. So in our JavaScript, we say template hello greeting, greeting being the name of the attribute that we're trying to change here, greeting. So template hello greeting, and then a function return welcome to test app, and that's what we were seeing here, welcome to test app for our greeting text. This is for events. Same thing, we call the hello template, and we call events on it. And then events take this format, which is a hash of click and the attribute that you're clicking onto, or mouse over, or whichever, and the attribute. And in this case, it takes a function and says if you click on the input, then do the console log. You pressed the button. Pretty straightforward. And the server, not doing anything. So 2 concepts. First, the template names, and then attributes or events that you can call on those templates. For example, here we're calling the click for this input field on the hello template. So I mean, this is all nice. It's great. I mean, it's very basic. It doesn't look like you can do anything with Meteor.js except make a one-file JavaScript spaghetti thing. But what I'm here to show you today is that There's more to Meteor than just this one file syntax. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start by erasing everything. Bear with me here. I just need to open another project. So I have an example build. So we can take a look at it. I'm going to move this off the screen so you can't see it. But I'm going to progressively move things back in here. So the first thing we want to do is get rid of all this. So we're not going to use if client, if server all over the place, right? This doesn't make any sense. So the first thing we're going to do is create a client and a server folder. So these folders are special, the client and the server, and they will only run on the client or the server. So new folder. So we have the client, we have the server, and we're going to also make a lib folder, and that lib folder is going to run on both the client and the server, and is going to run first. So then it would be nice on the client. What do we need on clients, right? We need a view folder, probably your views. So we can do a views folder. And it'd be nice to have controllers, right? Coming from the Rails world, we like controllers. Controllers for your views, something like that. So here's what I have in mind. On the server, and this is like what I've thought would be the best way to do this, but feel free to, if you have comments. On the server, we'd be saying, what can people subscribe to? What are our collections? And keep in mind, Meteor only works with Mongo. So we just define a collection, and then you can create any attributes inside the collection. So on the server, we'd define the collections, and then on the client, we would subscribe to these collections and render the views. And in the library folder, we'd have this idea of a model, which would have validations, which would have just relationship between different collections, that kind of thing. So I looked a little bit into this, and this didn't seem that Meteor.js was able to do it out of the box. And then I discovered a couple of what are the equivalent of gems, which are packages for Meteor. So there's 3 packages that I'm going to install right now. I'm going to show you how to install packages at the same time. The first one is called Iron Router, and this will take care of our routes. So Meteor has this mrt add, and then you specify the name, and that will add you your package, the equivalent of installing a gem. I'm going to show you how that works in a second. So everything is installed. So now if we go back to our test app, we see that we have these smart JSON files with Iron Router, and we have this folder packages, which has our Iron Router package inside it. So we don't need really to look at these at all ever. Just keep in mind that there's extra things you can do with these packages, but I'm just going to install them for now. So I'm going to install Iron Router. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's this Meteor folder at the top, which has a package file, which has all the packages that you've ever installed in here. And while we're here, there's 2 packages that you're supposed to remove before you launch the production. One called Insecure, which will allow you to do any kind of database query from the client, and Auto-Publish, which will publish to all clients everything. So we won't remove this for now, but we'll get to it in a second. So the 3 packages. So Iron Router, which will provide us routes and controllers. Then Mini-Mongoid, which will provide us the equivalent of models or Mongoid in the Rails world. So by default, Mongo comes with something called Meteor comes with something called Mini-Mongo by default. And the syntax is a little bit weird, and Mini-Mongoid is just my preference in this case. And then we can do something like Coffeescript here. What's that?
Now we're talking.
Now we're talking, okay. All right. So before I move on, I just want to show why Coffeescript. Why Coffeescript? Coffeescript is not that great. Nobody likes Coffeescript. Coffeescript. If I managed to have that right. So Coffeescript has this nice thing called a class. If I can find it. Class inheritance and super. So I don't know if we can all see this. Let me try it. So this section right here of Coffeescript is probably the most important thing that Coffeescript offers. So you have this concept of classes, inheritance, and super, which are all things that, coming from the Rails world, we want. First thing is you can do something like this. Class animal, constructor, and then an action, and then class snake extends animal with move, which is alert, and class horse extends animals with another move. And it has the behavior we'd expect. Sam is a new snake, Tom is a new horse, and when we call move, they would give us the expected outcome of galloping or slithering. But when we see the code this compiles to with the extend and the super, etc., this is pretty ugly. There's a lot of prototype stuff, a lot of gibberish. For those of you that like JavaScript, this probably looks amazing, but yeah. So Coffeescript for classes. Coming back to our app, now we have the pieces in place to start building something that makes sense. So the first thing we're going to do is look at our model. And what we're going to try to build today is a page where people can share recipes. And if you guys want to join in, I can give you my IP. Probably, I don't know if we can over this network though. It doesn't seem like it. Anyways, okay, so this won't be an interactive product demo unless there's a way for us to connect them. I don't know if we're on the same network. I don't think we are. All right, so I'll do it in two different browser windows so you guys can see the interaction. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file in my lib directory, and this one will be my recipes. Because the idea is I want a couple of recipes. So first thing, class recipe extends mini mongoid. This is the syntax for mini mongoid. Everything needs to extend this mini mongoid file. And just because I know you're curious, mongoid, I'm going to have to go a little bit faster. I'm running a bit late on time. But mini mongoid is just one file. This Coffeescript file here. Let me see if I can make this full screen. Oops. Cancel. So mini mongoid does this. When you inherit from it, it will do a constructor class, which is sort of like the Rails constructor. Has and belongs to many, belongs to, has many, and then it will give you, I'm skipping the details, it'll give you errors is valid, validate, save, update, push. Push is the equivalent of update attributes for an array, and then pull, delete, destroy, reload. And it'll give you this where function that we're used to, first, last, all. So basically, coming from the Rails world, this should be pretty familiar. So very quickly, I'm going to have to do more copy pasting, but so our recipes. So this is our recipe. First, we want a collection which is based on the recipes collection. It's just the correct collection we're creating. It's going to belong to some users. It's going to have ingredients. We're going to provide some defaults, so the name and the cooking time. so we have this before create hook where we can say the attribute name is going to be, and I'm using underscore here, so titleize attribute name. So this is like all the stuff we're used to with Rails before create hook. And then a function like, so the at is this, right? So it's the equivalent of a self. So a self.zesty, it's going to give us all the ingredients. So this is like a named scope, pretty much. So self.zesty is going to give us where ingredient name is zesty. So on Mongo, you can pass in regular expressions like this to do searches. And then validate, so unless you're, instead of having validates and then a bunch of different validates, you have just one validate function. And as long as it returns an error, this will stop and return the error. So in this case, we're going to be validating that the name should be no longer than 3 letters. Error message, spicy. So spicy is instance method. So a specific recipe dot spicy will give us, that's a spicy and the name of the recipe. And then my recipe will give us the recipe. So this will give you a true or false depending if it's you, and the creator name, so the username. So that's basically the recipe. I'm gonna, because of lack of time, I'm gonna just skip and just use the final product so I can walk you through it. I was planning on doing the whole thing, but I was a little bit ambitious. So ingredients embedded in recipe. So this is a key concept in Mongo, that you can embed sort of objects into other objects. So we're embedding here the recipe, putting a default, a nice quantity of my recipe, and the user model. The collection is Meteor user, and this is provided by a package that Meteor gives you to do authentication. I won't go into the details. And then debug true is just to have a more verbose log. Current, so if I do user.current, so the model current, again, this is a class method, it will give you the current user. So a user has many recipes, has and belongs to many friends, and we can see who they're friends with by passing the ID, etc. So let's just, so that's basically the lib, which is the equivalent of the models. Now on the client, we have, through Iron Router, these routes. Disregard the top part for now, but basically you have this concept of a layout in Iron Router, so you can specify the layout template. So in the views, I have this layout file, which just has a template with the name layout. And in my routes, I can say layout template is layout, and that's just going to use it. In my layout, so the layout template, I have a yield. And just like in Rails, the yield will take on whatever comes inside the route. So you have your router map, which has route home and different routes. And I'll show how we can use these routes, but it's similar to Rails. And there's a layout event, which is when you click the logout button, I want it to go home. So this, again, was the syntax that Meteor uses, where it's the template name and the events, and then the action that we're taking on. And you can see that you can use your routes both in the view and in the controller, or the routes in this case, using the router go method to go to these routes. So now that we have the routes, we understand that we're going to have templates. Now we need controllers. And the controllers, the way they work is, again, this is provided by Iron Route. So again, we're using the Coffeescript syntax of class with extends, and this time we're extending route controller from Iron Route. And each of these, by default, maps to a route. So there's a lot of defaults here, just like in Rails. So if you do route recipes, it's going to assume you have a recipes controller for this path. And so here we have a recipes controller, and the recipes controller is going to expect a recipes template. Obviously, we can override these by specifying them, but if you leave everything to the default, this will go to recipes template. And so there's a lot to these controllers, but right now I'm just using the before. I'm going to do a subscription to recipes. I'm going to wait for that subscription. So what this says is, on the client, try to subscribe to all the recipes and wait until you have them. And then the data attribute is going to fill in the recipes view. So if I go to my recipes view, here I'm going to have my recipes, and I'm going to have this other template recipe that I'm going to get. So for each my recipe, I'm going to get these, and then if I go to recipe, I'm going to get all these. So I'm going a little bit fast because I'm out of time, but I think you get the idea. I'm going to get user.current, which is the current user, get all his recipes. Those are my recipes. And then I'm going to loop through these my recipes. And then I put this in the same file, but it doesn't need to go in the same file. But for me, it just made sense. I'm going to put some events here. So when you click save, basically do recipe.create with the user ID and the name. And then the other event is when I click on ingredient save, I'm going to say find the ingredients and put the quantity and update basically the recipe by doing a push on this recipe and pushing ingredients in it. So ingredient, it's going to create this object here and then push it to the ingredients for that recipe. And we have delete, etc. So this was a really fast view of Meteor.js. I'm just going to show you what this looks like in the browser. Meteor. So what this does, I'm going to try to have two windows here at the same time. Localhost. So we're on the home route. We can log in. We have a sign. So I didn't show this part, but you just put in the equivalent of a gem. So you put in this library, and it gives you all this already built in for you, where you can change your password, sign out, sign in, etc. So for the example, I'm going to sign out of this one. I'm going to sign in to a different b@c.com password. So we have a user, which is user. Oh, so in this case, I'm on the same browser, so I need to go into incognito. Sorry about that. Localhost. So we have our user B, and we're going to have our user A. All right. So user A has this recipe, which is BBB and OKOK. User A has the recipe AAAA. And you can see that they each are subscribed to different recipes. And we can add some ingredients, like one, sorry for the lack of a better example, 1 dash of CCC. And here there's 2 dashes of SSS. I don't know why I got an exception on this, but let's hide this for a second. For some reason, I think it logged out. Okay, so bear with me. So B can be friends with A, and this is automatically, if you guys can connect it, you can create an account, and then we could have seen multiple updates as we go. And the same thing here. So if I'm friends with B, if I click on friends with B and I click on my friend's recipes, right now B doesn't have any recipes. Does that make any sense? B does have recipes. So I don't know what's going on, but there's a problem with my code. I must have changed something. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the best example ever. Yes, so technically, I should be able to see the recipes here under my friend's recipes once I'm friends with this person. And then I would have been able to see me adding recipes dynamically. But unfortunately, that's not going to work. And that's all the time we have for today. So I'm going to have to do a second episode on this where I show you the working app and how amazing this is. But do you guys have any questions?
It sounds like it's pretty, like it's a different approach to, like the guy said in the video, the way of putting together web apps and kind of what you send over the wire. And it only works with MongoDB right now, you said?
Yes, it only works with MongoDB, but there's probably going to be support for SQL databases and other non-relational databases in the future.
Right. Well, my question was just sort of like, MongoDB has a pretty specific sort of set of use cases as far as where it's good and then where it's less performant than something more standard. Do you think Meteor kind of matches up with that sort of use case grouping, like in a general sense? I don't expect you to go all the way down.
I think Mongo has some good things in the sense that it's easy to not have to specify a schema. You can just keep adding things to your objects without having to worry about them. So it fits well with the Meteor mindset.
Does the Meteor mindset extend out to something like an SQL style database? Okay. It just hasn't reached that support level yet.
Yeah, they haven't built the support for it yet, but they will.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's still in its very early ages. It's not release 1 yet. It's going to be release 1 probably in January or February of 2014. But you can see that now that there's a lot more work being done on it in terms of Iron Router and in terms of Mini Mongoid.
Just community stuff.
Community stuff, that it's really becoming something that is usable and not just for making like single JavaScript files that do things. You can really make a full app right now with it. And it's the main use of it. Obviously, I don't think this will ever replace Rails, because Rails is really performant when it comes to just forms and things that are not dynamic. But when it comes down to if you were making a chat client, or if you were making something that's more involved, like a single page app where things need to be very responsive and people are sharing this information in real time,
right.
I think this kind of framework is really the way to go.
Nice. Thanks.
So I was a little bit confused by the router, because it seems like that's supporting like a multi-page sort of methodology where each new page can be a new request. But I thought the idea of Meteor, from what it seemed like in that guy's talk, is that the user's always within a single session, and then that session is contained within a connection, a long-term connection to the server. So you're switching pages. What's actually going on there?
So the switching pages might not. So that is, in some apps you might not need to switch pages, but in others you might need to have different pages. Like if you have a marketing site, and you have like 3 pages for marketing, and then you have 1 page which is your single page app, right? Okay. So you still want to make those 3 marketing pages separate pages, and then when you go into your app, you'd have a single page thing. So
this case makes sense. I guess I'm confused about what that does to a session then, because if that's terminating a connection and creating a new one, just which always terminate the page, which is what it looks like it was doing. I mean, what happens to your session then? Do you fall back to a more traditional cookie-based approach, just like Rails does, or does Meteor still know that the next connection is coming from you, and keeps your session associated with that? Do you know how it handles state between those requests?
Yeah. So basically, it's a single-page app. So there's no, even though there's different routes, it's still a single-page app. It's just the template that you're showing on the page is different, but your sessions are going to live throughout, and it's like you can subscribe to different channels that you want to listen to on different pages. And so it will stop your subscription. Let's say you're on a page where you want to see a chat, and on the other page you want to see just the list of users, right? So on one page you're subscribing to those messages, but on the other page you want to see all the channels and all the users. So you're subscribed to different channels on different routes.
Okay,
and so when you subscribe to a channel, basically every time the database gets something new, they will update your local cache with that new thing that they got right away. So you don't want to be subscribed to too many things at the same time if you can avoid it, and that's where the route sometimes meet.
Well, it plays well with something like Angular on the front end, so you have Meteor just doing data pushing it to like a front end.
I don't think so. I think there are projects to try to merge them together, but I think it breaks sort of the idea. So I was going to say Angular is good at doing two-way bindings with things like that, but with Meteor, the idea is that you're not doing two-way bindings, you're doing really a binding with the server. So whatever you change on the client goes all the way back to the server and then propagates to all the other clients. So it really has its own way of doing it. So I don't think it would play really nice. But if you wanted to make things like widgets or things like that, then that would play well with it. So it depends how you're planning to use it. Honestly, I haven't played around with it much.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That would kind of break. They would fight each other.
Yeah. But I know in the community there's people trying to make it happen. So.
And Meteor. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say there's this other project called Meteor.js, which is more friendly. It's sort of similar to Meteor in that it tries to do real-time things, but it's more friendly towards existing packages, including Angular and Express and all the other Node.js packages. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Is the Meteor runtime like its own project, or is it still on top of something else like Node?
Yes. So Meteor is built around Node. Node is part of Meteor, but you cannot use Node packages with Meteor. You have to use Meteor packages. Okay. And it brings some good and some bad. The good is that it's easier to install them. It's easier to deploy them. The bad is that there's a lot of packages that from the community that you cannot use with Meteor.js.
Yeah.
But
especially like database stuff.
Yeah,
but that's why they type down Mongo.
I feel like ultimately that's like some people are upset at this because they see it as a fork in like the development efforts. But I feel like Meteor.js on its own has value, and that people like. I think it's worth the fork with the normal packages from Node.js.
You did any work with deployment?
So they provide Meteor. The people who created Meteor.js provide their own hosting environment for free. So you can it's a single command like deploy, and it will deploy. I don't know how that would work in a production app. It's really meant for testing. I know you can package your Meteor app as a Node.js app and then deploy it just as you would any other Node.js project. So I haven't done that, but there is a way to do it.
You know if it runs with any other, does it run on a proxy, so you have Nginx anywhere in the equation, so there's a public folder to try to handle all that itself?
You can stick a traditional reverse proxy in front of one polling request, so I'm sure any sort of setup using a proxy or Nginx would work. Yeah, it's just normal web.
Cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed.
And Nginx and friends can handle that just fine, so I'm sure you could do any of those.
Good. Thank you for joining.
Thanks a lot, Michael.